Happy Tuesday, everybody. We are live. Day 6 of our Games for the Waynes Game Jam. So if this is your first time tuning in, we are doing a game jam for Games for the Waynes, which is raising money for the Glasgow Children's Hospital. We're on day 6. Hello, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Hey, Fern. We're on day 6 of the game jam here. And if you weren't here for the stream on Saturday, we actually got a playable build going. So I'll just pop that in the chat. We actually got a playable build going, so you can check it out now. It's obviously very, very primitive, very early days, but it is playable, and it's something you can check out if you're interested in doing that. Got a couple shout outs. We had some really cool contributions over the weekend. So we had one of you guys who wished not to be credited, created this awesome thread model, and they released it on Sketchfab, so anyone can check it out. So I know I said I'm not doing any work off stream, but I did bring that into the game, and it's looking really cool. So we got like a nice little improvement on the thread spool there. We had a few of you guys created some awesome art pieces. So Fern, this is yours for your rendition of the UK here, which is really, really cool. We had some awesome ones on Discord as well. Barry created some really, really clever ones. Even a Farewell North piece where he recreated Chesley inside our little embroidery prototype. This one's really cool here with some little engineering work going on. We had Dadfident Dadbo, who created the one I used in the thumbnail here, which is really, really cool. This is kind of the idea of what we're going for with this game, these kind of landscape pieces. Hey, Fern. We had QXT, who created a really, let's call it abstract. He created a very abstract doggy froggy thing here, which is really cool. What else? Anka, who built a really cool 3D version of this. So this is a top-down 3D simulation. So rather than falling from the top of the screen down to the bottom of the screen, this is like a bird's eye view falling directly away from the camera. Super, super cool. And I think this might end up being a direction that we have to go in, because I think we're still struggling with that top-down vertical gravity situation. But this is really cool, very inspiring. So it's really, really cool to see people creating stuff with the tool, having fun with it. I'm really, really glad to see that. So how you guys doing? How's your weekend been? Or how was your weekend, I should say. The goal for today. Hey, Neil. Fern, the UK was fun to attempt. You did a great job with it. I'm no expert, but that looks like a perfect rendition of the UK to me. Yeah, the goal for today is we're going to start actually generating a 3D world out of this. So we're going from 2D to 3D today, and I want to get right into that. So we are going to start on that today. The goal will be to have a terrain that is at least colored the same as our embroidery canvas, and we're going to see how far we get with that. The goal for the week will be to have an environment that we can actually walk around in, with maybe some trees and stuff like that coming in. But we gotta walk before we can run, so let's get the terrain going. And yeah, I'd say let's get right into it. I should also say the prototype is still up. We got some great feedback and I've added all of that to the to-do list. So if you guys have any thoughts on how we can improve, definitely let me know. Hey Lux, how's it going? Just spilled tea everywhere, but that's okay. Just saying hi before I go to lunch. Hey, how does this time work for you guys? Because I can move an hour earlier. I feel like that might work better for folks in the UK who are just going on their lunch break around this time. Would it be better to move this to 10 o'clock UK time, 11 o'clock European Central Time? Doing all right? I'm great. I'm good, man. I'm really good. Thanks for asking. All right, let's get right into it. Let's create a terrain. And we're going to start generating this thing based on what's done inside the embroidery canvas. Later on the week, we had someone who last week suggested looking at wave function collapse. I think that's a really good suggestion. I think I dismissed it at the time. Actually, at the time, I didn't know what it was. Went and did some research, then I dismissed it. Now I have some ideas on how we could actually potentially use wave function collapse, but we're not going to get to that today. Today, we're just going to start setting up the height map and the splat map of our terrain. I can't watch between 12 and 1-ish, personally, because lunch. Yeah, I think that's going to be an issue for a lot of our European friends. This time is great, though it does kind of interrupt lunch a bit. Yeah, so maybe I move it back an hour. So we start an hour earlier. Be better to have it morning / afternoon so I can have it on the side, but it's just me personally. I hope the tea didn't get on your dog. No, it didn't. No, she's good. I can't really do later, but I could do earlier. Not too much earlier, but maybe an hour earlier. So if that's a little bit better for folks, then we can definitely do that. Okay, so does that make sense? Today, we're trying to get the terrain going. Tomorrow, we'll set up a first-person character controller so we can actually walk around that terrain. And then later in the week, we'll start populating trees and grass and plants and farms and all that kind of stuff. So let's get right into it. Let's create a little world builder. And this will have a terrain on it. Defo better. I would be able to listen at 10. Yeah, maybe we'll start moving it earlier, starting tomorrow. All right, serialized field, self, private, terrain. Watch the VODs for what I miss, but always better live. Yeah, always better live. Cool, have a good lunch, Lux. Hey, CV Hamilton. So while I'm typing this up, what you guys may or may not know is that terrains are basically just a bunch of fancy images. So essentially you have a height map, which is a grayscale texture where black is low and white is high. So it's values from 0 to 1. And based on that texture, the height of the terrain is kind of offset. So we're going to generate that. We're going to do the same for the splat map, which is like the actual colors and textures that you see. We still haven't decided on our art direction, so that's something to figure out. But we'll start with just some really basic textures for now. So what we're going to do to start, just to see how slow this is going to be, is just every frame we're going to rebuild our terrain. And it's going to be really, really slow, I'm assuming. And we'll profile it, we'll figure out how to make it a little bit more optimized. So let's check our data structure. So we already have a falling sands guy. So let's grab a reference to that. And then every frame, we will grab that data. So we have, what do we have here? We have an array of particles, an array of shader data. And array, particle. And let's expose that. And let's just move these into their own files so we avoid the naming conflict. So particle. So as a recap, for those who haven't seen the earlier streams, particles are data structure to represent each element on the canvas. Right? So each particle has a type, a position, the last time it was updated, all that kind of stuff. Let's pop that over here. This is a struct. And it's serializable. And then we have shader data, which is actually what's passed into the shader, and it's currently just a color. And we also have one per particle. Let's get rid of those. Cool, so now we can access the particles elsewhere. And we can access the shader data, which actually I don't think we need for now. So the goal is we need to generate this height map texture. And the way that we're going to do that is Unity has a handy little API for this. So terrain data set heights. Yes. Terrain data set heights. So I'm thinking to start with, we don't really have any way to create verticality in our canvas, right? So right now, if this is all a top-down view, everything is at the same y-axis, essentially. So what we can do is basically just generate a flat height map. However, we need to have water be below everything else. So if the pixel is water, then we will move it down slightly. Otherwise, we'll set it at like a default height. Later on, we need to figure out how we're going to add height map or actual like verticality to the generated environment, whether that's just random or whether the player can do that themselves. But for the moment, I think we can get away with just setting it to be a pretty flat, boring terrain. So just update all these. Yep. So quick recap for those who are just joining. I think I was a bit quick on the draw today. So we are creating these, let's get rid of that terrain for a moment. We are creating a vertical kind of bird's eye view simulation. We're using falling sand to do that. So there's a little bit of dissonance here because we have a kind of y-axis gravity, but this is actually generating a bird's eye view. That's the idea anyways. So this would be like a lake, and next to it we have some grass and like a nice field or something. And we can add more water, and we can add rocks, and we have like this whole like physics simulation kind of going on here. It's pretty cool. But the idea is that we can then transition into that environment and actually walk around it in 3D space. So this would be, you know, a big terrain with a field going through it and some water on the sides, all that stuff. So we have a flat terrain. We need to now populate this with the right colors, the right height map, all that stuff. Make sense? So for the moment, every frame, we're just going to regenerate the terrain, and then we'll optimize this after. So on start, we'll create a two-dimensional array of our heights. So this is our height map. And this will be height map equals new float. And this is the falling sands width, falling sands height. And then every frame should be x, and y equals 0, y less than. All we need to do is in the height map, and this is indexed in a very strange way, it's yx instead of xy. This needs to be a value from 0 to 1, where 1 is the maximum height and 0 is the minimum height. So if the particle at that index is water, we'll use the minimum height. Otherwise, we'll use like a default medium height. Oh, QXT, hey, you forgot the stream alert on Discord. Thank you for the heads up. Let me post that. Thank you very much for reminding me. And sorry for that. That makes sense. Okay, how's it going, QXT? You missed, I was giving a little shout out to the wonderful frog dog that you created over the weekend. Okay, so we can grab the particle, particle, and this will be helpers dot grid space to particle index. Yep, and that's into xy. Need our import. I know it wasn't a frog, but it kind of looks more like a frog than a dog to me, so I'm calling it a froggy doggy. It's great though. I love it. Very, very good. And I'm good, thank you. Very well, very well. Okay, and this is let's just grab a reference to that. Int width equals falling sands dot width. Int height equals falling sands dot height. So if particle is water, we'll go 0. Otherwise, we'll just do we'll just hard code 0.1 for now. So what we should hopefully see is anywhere that's water is lower, anywhere that's not water is a bit higher up. And then we can add a plane for the water, and then we can start populating the world and the colors and all that kind of stuff. So let's give that a go. and see how broken this is. Okay, so we have our world builder. Give that a reference to the Falling Sands. Let's have a quick look at the settings here. We might, I'm not actually sure, we might have to conform to one of these height map resolutions. I don't know if we can use a custom resolution like we are now. This is all fine for the moment. Let's give it a go. Actually, first, let's move this. Hey, Manuel, how's it going, man? I'm doing very well. You had, looks like you had an amazing hike this weekend. Based on the pictures you shared on Discord. Okay, and nothing is happening. Why is that? Oh, of course. We are never actually using this. Okay, so this .terrain .set height map. Oh no, terrain data .set height. So it'll be 0, 0, and this .height map. That would help. Noticing, oh, sorry, a whole bunch of messages that are not posting to the screen for some reason. Let me just catch up on that. Neil, so how are you planning to deal with verticality in the scene itself? Sorry if you've already covered this. I'm assuming you don't want all the land to just be flat and the water being slightly lower. No, I definitely don't. I'm not sure how exactly we're going to go about that. I think what Anka did in his little Discord example that I was shouting out earlier, where is that? Here. So he did it in a different way. So rather than following top down in like a 2D space, he's still doing a bird's eye view, and then the color here represents how high it is. So the more you draw on a single point, the higher it becomes. I think that would be really cool. I think what I would miss in this case is the fun of the 2D falling animation and all the different directions. But this makes a lot more sense. So it's something that we might ultimately have to go with. But I'm kind of putting that off for the moment. This does definitely solve the problem though of getting more verticality, because you can kind of build the world up. But if you guys have other ideas, I'm all open to hearing how you guys might solve that. But for today, yeah, the goal is to just kind of generate that flat world. Genius, yeah. He made something really cool. Okay, let's see if this is any better. Hey, okay, we're getting something. It's pretty messed up, but we're getting something. Okay, so this is because the max height is probably very, very high. So where is the max height defined? Terrain height, yeah, here. So if we made this like something more reasonable, like 50. So this is where all of our water particles are. Let's pop this to the side. So if we drop more water, it's kind of ridiculous, but it's working. It makes sense. By the way, if you guys post a message and you don't see it pop up on the screen, chances are I might miss it, so feel free to just post it again. I don't know why some YouTube messages get missed. I had a wonderful Sunday, definitely one of the prettiest hikes I've ever been on. Yeah, it looked like it. My legs still hurt, but I would be confused if not, considering the length and elevation. So how long, you said it was like 20 kilometers, or no, 40 kilometers. You said it was something insane. I can't remember. Okay, neat. So hopefully this is starting to make sense, right? Where we're creating a 2D kind of landscape view, and then we'll be able to walk around in that environment. Obviously, this is very, very rough, but we're getting somewhere. 31 kilometers. Wow. 1,700 total elevation. That's crazy. Do you have any idea of how many steps that is? Like 50,000 or something? So one thing I want to test is we need to set actually, here's what we need to do. So we need to set the terrain width. Size? Total size in world units, width, height, and length. Let's see what that prints out. Right now our terrain is much bigger than we need it to be. An interesting style is the style of the game Shelter. Are you planning to make it more realistic or more fun? Let's have a look at Shelter. Oh, this is cool, like a nice low poly style. That's very cool. Yeah, that's a really good question. We need to figure out the art direction, which is obviously going to be quite important. I think something lower poly is easier to manually create all the art, especially for this game jam. Something more realistic, we probably have to use like an asset pack to fit within the time constraints. I'm not really sure. I'm not sure where we want to go with that. We could also maybe reuse some stuff from Feral North, do a more stylized look, but I think I'd want to do something a little bit different. I think in my head, I was always imagining more of a kind of realistic environment. However, that's going to be really tough with the time constraint, so we might have to do something else. The speed that you've managed to get this working decently is wild. I mean, it's just a very rough prototype, though. Like this, I appreciate it, but it is very, very rough for sure. Started at 7 in the morning and hiked a total of 11 hours. Wow. But a lot of time was spent enjoying the view. I bet. Yeah, those views are incredible. 45,000 steps apparently, but that's just my phone's estimation. Wow. The project's coming along very nicely, progressing real fast. Thank you. Yeah, like I said, I think we're, this is obviously very, very rough. But I'm glad that we're making some progress at least. Okay, 1,000 by 1,000 by 50. Okay, cool. So we can do this. We'll set the size to match our simulation, so we don't have a whole bunch of wasted space. Is new float. Falling sands dot width. We need to define our height, which I think we can just keep what's there. Size dot y, and then falling sands dot height. So this is vector 3. This should now actually match the resolution of our canvas. And so if we test this, if we drop a particle from the top of the canvas to the bottom of the canvas, we should see it go from the top of the terrain to the bottom of the terrain. I think a kind of playful animated style will look great and might be easier than full realism. The other thing is, so I think we have to rule out realism because I want to add like sheep and birds and all that kind of stuff. And I don't want to spend a week creating a sheep. You know what I mean? I think if we do something really low poly, we can quickly make a bunch of different animals and we could just have them kind of like jitter around. I think maybe that's what you're saying, a very playful little animation where they kind of just like boop, 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 boop. They don't have to have like full, quadruped movement. So I think, yeah, something low poly is definitely the way to go. Okay, so that changed. So if we drop a particle from the top, nope, it's still only using a quarter of the terrain. So why is that? 200 by 250, that matches what we have. Is it because of the height map resolution? That's probably why. So let's change that real quick. Height map resolution 257. And then if I set the simulation to be 257, that should work. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so I don't want to be constrained to the predefined height map resolutions though. Can we change that? Yeah, that sounds right. Maybe something more or less similar to Kingdoms and Castles. Oh, I think Kingdoms and Castles, Neil, you recommended this game, didn't you? Kingdoms and Castles. Oh, maybe this is a different game. Canvas of Kings, that's what Neil recommended. Yeah, something like this could work. Yeah, something super low poly. I think it's, I'm personally not a huge low poly art style fan. It's not my favorite thing. But it'd be fun to learn how to do it. I've never really messed with low poly before. And Yeah, it'll definitely save us a lot of time. How much time do you have to make this game? Basically, until August 31st is the end of the game jam. And I'm only working on this like 2 hours a day because I only work on it while I'm streaming. So, like 2 weeks of actual work time, something like that, which isn't a lot. Oh, Neil, you do know this one as well. That's funny. I didn't recommend this one, but it's been on my wishlist forever. Yeah, it looks cute. I dig it. Okay, can we change the height map resolution? No, we can't. Height map, let's have a quick Google. We might have to do something else though. Unity terrain custom height map resolution. What is this called? Height map scale. So I think we do have to stick with their presets. So there's a couple ways we could go about this. Easiest might be a compute shader, or most efficient anyways might be a compute shader. So let's quickly do that. Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so terrain height map dot compute. Nope, not what I wanted. Come on. This is far above my knowledge of game development. I just started learning Unity 2 months ago. Congrats. I mean, it's all one step at a time though. Don't feel like don't feel put off when you see someone working on something and you don't understand it yet. Just try and like understand what you can, ask questions. I'm very, very happy to explain what I'm doing. But I know it can be intimidating when you kind of like look ahead at someone who's been doing this for a bit longer and it seems like, you know, it suddenly feels like you don't know anything. Definitely don't feel that way. All right. Okay, so basically what we need to do is we need to write a shader that generates an image that looks something like this. So it's a grayscale image. The resolution will actually match what we have in the terrain, and then for each pixel, we're going to fill it with basically the nearest, or a blend of the nearest pixels in our simulation, because they're not always going to match. So let's see. We want a structure buffer for input. This is our particles. We do already have this in our rendering shaders. Let's move this over. Rendering shaders. HLSL. So we have falling sand.hlsl, so we can import that. Import falling sand.hlsl. / That's the problem. Terrain.compute was not imported directly. Hang on a second. I always forget the syntax for setting up a compute shader. Unity compute shader. Test.compute, yep. So we want to kernel. Yep. Get rid of all that. This can be probably 64. Ooh. Generate height map. And we do want a texture as the output. So let's just do this for the moment. So we're going to fill it with white, so we should see just a very tall terrain once we get this working. But why does this not allow... What is the problem here? Is this just Rider being funny? Invalid preprocessed command import. Oh, include, of course. It's include. There we go. Okay. So that'll give us access to our particles, the width and the height of the simulation. So we can use that in a minute, but let's just get this all hooked up and generate a plain white particle, or a plain white height map. Would the art be a bit more like Wobble Dogs? Let's have a look. Yeah, this kind of fits like that low poly. I don't know we'll go that low poly. I'm thinking maybe something more like Equilinox. If you guys know this game, it was created by another YouTuber, Thin Matrix. Maybe something like that. Just like a flat shaded low poly kind of look. Oh, by the way, was there a playtest demo? I completely missed that. Yes, here. Anyone can use this command to grab it. If you just do exclamation embroidery, that'll give you a link to the demo. For some reason, that's not popping up on YouTube though. Technical difficulties. There you go. Hopefully that comes through. Oh, you familiar with that? It's a really fun game, actually. I think I discovered this game before I discovered the YouTuber. It's really good. It's like he builds like a whole ecosystem simulator, and you can like get some really kind of complex interactions going. It's a lot of fun. It's good fun. You have it as well? Nice. Okay, so in our world builder, let's grab a reference to our compute shader, public compute shader, height map shader. We can then create, instead of a float array for our height map, we're going to create a texture, render texture, height map. This will be a new render texture. Do they tell us what the format needs to be? Height map, texture. Oh, we can just grab a reference to it. Ah, neat. Okay, let's just do that. So let's do away with that for a moment. I'm not sure. Let's see if let's just make sure this isn't null. Just do that for a second. So what we can do is you can grab a reference to that height map. We can run our compute shader on it. We can generate a new height map, and then we might have to set it back. It might just automatically work, but let's see. So it is not null. Nice. Okay. So what that's going to look like again is it's just basically a grayscale texture where white is very high and black is very low, and that generates the height map. So let's run our compute shader. This dot, what do you call it? Height map. Dispatch. And actually we need to pass this in. So it's height map shader dot set texture. This is, what do we call that? Output. Cool. And we could dispatch that kernel. So for those who don't know, in a compute shader, a kernel is basically defined at the top, and it's just basically just a function that can be invoked from outside. And we can get a reference to it, I believe, what is it, find kernel? Yeah. We can find it by name, and the name is generate height map. So that will give us the ID of the kernel, and then we can reference that elsewhere. Really fun to play with, actually. Awesome. I mean, it's super rudimentary, but some people have been able to create really cool stuff with it already, and that's definitely made this whole endeavor very worthwhile, just seeing what you guys have been creating. So if you do create anything manual, I'd love to see if you post on the Discord. Genuinely fascinating watching a proper game dev work. I don't know about that. I feel like so one thing I've learned about myself doing these streams is I cannot think basically, I cannot think when you guys are all staring at me. So if you don't mind just looking away for a minute. No, I'm kidding. But like, I feel like in the last week, I've been struggling with the most basic stuff. So I'm feeling a lot of imposter syndrome doing these streams. But I really appreciate you guys hanging out and Neil pretending that I'm a proper game dev. I must say the shadows and lighting make it look like a horror game. Oh yeah. The lighting is very, very dark. On like I'm assuming you're talking about like the thread models, the thread spool and the needles and all that. I'm on Henry the Potato, sadly, so I can't play with it right now. I'm sorry to hear that. We never figured out why it crashes on that computer, did we? Okay, so we can dispatch the kernel ID. And we want, how does this work again? I always forget. I think we want the total length of the height map divided by this. I think. I always forget how this works. Let's try that. I might be completely wrong. Width times height divided by 64. I might have to Google how that works again because I never remember. So what are we going to get out of this? If this works, we're going to get an all white height map. So it should be at the maximum height. It should automatically update the render texture reference in the train, so I don't think we have to set it back. Let's give that a go and see what happens. And hope that my computer doesn't catch fire. Exactly, yeah. So it's quite dark on that stuff. So my initial idea was that this embroidery kind of desk that we're on, it's like the real world. That's why it's you know, using PBR textures and being more realistic and all that. That's like the real world. And then we create the embroidery and we're going into this kind of like dreamlike memory world and it'll be more stylized and everything. So we'll see how we get on with that. But that was the initial idea. But I think it is quite dark and rough at the moment. It's so dark because there's no ambient light. There is a directional light, but we were experimenting last week with this cookie technique that's making it extra dark. Did do a bit of searching about app data not appearing. I couldn't find any solutions or reasons why it wouldn't appear. Yeah, I need to take a look on that. Sorry about that, Fern. Remoto, hey there, thanks for the follow. Appreciate you. Okay, let's see if this works. No, it does not work. That's an error. So, good chance to remind everyone that this whole stream that we're doing, this game jam, is all to raise money for Games for the Wains, which is raising money for the Glasgow Children's Hospital here in Scotland. So every time there's an error, that's like a runtime error, an exception that's thrown, I'm donating £2 to charity. And if you guys have the means and you want to help raise funds, you can always do that through this link. But absolutely no pressure, of course. So let's see what's going on. The variable height map shader of World Builder has not been assigned. That would be important. Let's have a look. Compute shader, terrain height map. Yes. Give that another go. Okay. I feel like we're going to get a few errors here. Finally been able to catch your stream. I reached out to you, by the way, on Discord. If you have some time, I'd be very thankful if you could check out. Did you DM me? I don't really do DMs. But if you want to message me in one of the public channels, just tag me. I'm very, very open. Compute shader, terrain height map, property output. Define texture as UAV, but the texture wasn't created with... So do we need to create a new one? So basically what this is saying is that the texture that we're trying to write to is not marked as read write. But I don't know if we're allowed to modify that one or if we need to generate a new one. So let's find out. Terrain, modify height map, procedurally. No, I don't want general. I want specifically Unity. DM'd you, yes, not sure if you remember me. We did the interview together, right? Or am I completely... It was a while ago, but I think we did an interview together? Hopefully? Sorry if not. Yeah, okay, yeah. Okay, I'll check my DMs after the stream. Okay. Yep, no worries. This is all editor time. I don't care about that. Okay, let's just do it. Let's just do it. So this has a getter. It does not have a setter. Okay, so we can't overwrite it. So let's just make sure that enable random write is true. That should do it. Fingers crossed. Setting random write of already created render textures not supported. Okay, so maybe we can't do this. Let's see. Unify, modify height map in Compute Shader. Nope. Let's see here. That's so lame that we can't overwrite this. Train set height map resolution. Or no, set height map texture. Okay, this guy's doing it. So he's grabbing a texture, and he is, what is he doing? Convert text to height. So he's then sampling the, no, texture.set pixel, texture apply. Yeah, he's just creating the texture from C#. That's not what I want. Copy actor render target. Ah, okay, here we go. Copy active render target to height map. Copies a specified part of the active render texture to the terrain height map texture. Okay, cool. So here's what we got to do. We're going to create our own render texture. And we will do that by copying what the terrain has. So we get all the same settings. .terrain data, .height map. I think we can do this. So what we can do is we can write to this render texture and then copy it to the terrain. So let's give that a go. Render shader. This terrain data dot sync. No, copy. See if we can find an example of this. Okay, copies the specified part of the active render texture to the terrain height map texture. This function calls dirty height map region internally and sends out the on-terrain changed message accordingly. The range of expected height values is between 0 and 0.5. Why 0.5? This is unlike terrain data.set heights, which expects values between 0 and 1. Okay, that's fine. That's very weird, but that's fine. Controls. Okay, let's do that. Copy active render texture to height map. So what we need to do, render texture dot active equals our render texture. Call that, and then we need a reference to what was there before. And we can set that back. Terrain data. Oh no, what am I doing? Come on. There we go. Active equals what was previously active. Okay, so we grab a reference to what's currently active. We set ours to be active, and then we call this copy and source rect, dest rect. So that would be 0, 0, and then our width and our height. No, sorry, the texture width. Is there going to be any relaxing music in the background for the finished thing? Actually, that's a great question, because I was just talking, I'm not 100% sure that we're going to do this, but I was just talking to my composer today, the same composer who did Farewell North. And he was saying it might be fun to do a stream together where he makes some music for the game. I think that'd be super, super cool. So if you guys want to see that, definitely shout about it in the Discord and here and all that. Because I think that would be a lot of fun to do. Why is this a vector 2int? Why is that a... Oh, okay, that makes sense, actually. Yeah, that's fine. Don't you need to enable random write before creating the texture to be able to edit it from the shader? Thank you. Yes, I do. Definitely do. I also need to clean this up. Yes, and then we need that. Thanks for the reminder, QXT. Can I shout about it here? Yes, you absolutely can. That sounds so amazing. I think that would be a lot of fun. So for those who don't know, our composer for Feral North, John Konsolakis, is an absolute genius. He's a really, really talented musician, composer, and he made an amazing soundtrack for Feral North, won all kinds of awards for it. Really, really cool stuff. And yeah, so he's been watching the streams. He said it'd be fun to do some music for this, so he's thinking about it. But you guys might need to help convince him that that'd be a good idea, because I think that'd be awesome to see his process and how he makes music. You would what is that, 1 quintillion% watch that? Yeah, I think that'd be really cool. And you guys can see how clueless I am when it comes to music. I kind of just tell him some emotions and some feelings that I want the music to accomplish, and he runs off and just creates incredible stuff. We don't need this anymore. Okay, what are we even doing? So we are grabbing a render texture, we're dispatching a compute shader, setting every pixel to white. We are then copying that to our terrain data, overriding what's in the height map, and maybe that'll work. We'll find out. Let's find out. Okay, nothing happened. Oh, they did say that this needs to be 0.5, not 1.0 for some strange reason. So let's do define height map max 0.5. Still nothing. There was another sync method that we saw. Sync height map. Perform synchronization queued by previous calls to texture to height map, which we did. So let's call that. See if that helps. I can never create music. I can play easy pieces, but no more. Do you play an instrument? I played a little bit of guitar and bass when I was young, but like very, very little. Like I barely got past like, you know, just like basic chords and stuff. I never really had I love listening to music. I'm listening to music all day, every day, but I never had like a knack for creating it, unfortunately. Am I crazy, or is that, okay, we're getting something. We've got something going on here. Let's see what our generated texture looks like. So it's all black for some reason with one red line at the bottom. That makes sense because it's an R16, so we only really have a red channel. That's fine. But why is it only the bottom line? Oh, of course. Okay, because we're doing, we need to convert this to XY coordinates. So, Unity Compute Shader per pixel of texture. Unity stores to copy the pixel data, blah, blah, blah. Nope. Compute shader, iterate, per pixel. Example, give me something. Okay, run a compute shader. Here's a basic example of compute shader which fills the output texture with red, but they're not checking. Oh, okay, hang on. I think I know why. So what we want to do is, let's go like this. We'll do 8 by 8. So we're still at 64, and then we'll do width over 8 over 8. There's a cleaner way to do this, which we'll do if this works. I just want to check. Render texture dot height over 8. Do we have any musicians watching? Anyone here play an instrument? Fern, what instrument do you play? Gopher, you play piano? Flower Girl, bass, guitar, and piano. Wow, nice. See, Gopher, I don't know why your message didn't show up there. Oh, it does show up on the screen. It doesn't show up in so I have a separate window that's showing the chat, and not everything shows up in it. So I'm sometimes missing your guys' messages on YouTube. But anyways, I'll try and keep an eye on the actual YouTube chat. Working on my grade 5 piano. So a lot of pianists. That's cool. We had a keyboard in our house growing up. I think my sister played a little bit, but I never got into it. And my wife plays a bit, or used to anyway. Guitar, self-taught, mostly just playing by tabs. Cool. Yeah, so when I was playing a little bit, I was just kind of reading tabs and stuff, but I barely got past like a little bit of like basic chords and stuff. And that was like nearly 30 years ago, so it's been a long time. Okay, our terrain just completely disappeared. Ah, there we go. Cool. So we have a flat terrain that's very, very high. Okay, so now what we can do, let's get rid of all of this. So we have our compute shader generating a height map, and now we can check our particles. So let's go like this. And right, so rather than just using the maxed out height map, what we're gonna do, we really only care, can we do this? We only care about the R channel. So let's just test one more thing before we get going. Can I just do this? How many years do you spend on Unity/coding? So I've been working as I was working as a professional software developer for like over 12 years. And you know, worked up from like junior to senior to tech lead. So a lot of years of experience as a programmer. In Unity, I started playing around in Unity in like 2015, so about 10 years. But I only went full-time as a game developer last year. So, and yeah, that seems to have worked. Cool. Let's do one more test. Let's do this. Let's generate a UV because we're going to need that. So float to UV equals, we need to know the width and the height of the texture. So let's go like this, float to output size. So this is dtid.xy over output size. And let's visualize the X. So let's pass this in. The reason we need this, we need to now know where in our particle simulation to sample. And the easiest way to do that is using the UV. As you guys know, we absolutely nailed the maths on that the other day, got it first try. It was absolutely no problem for us. If you didn't watch the streams, if you did watch the streams, you'll know we had a little bit of trouble. But if you didn't watch the streams, it was perfect. We nailed it. Holy moly. Yeah, I'm old. I'm in my 30s now. I've been doing this for a little while. The programming side anyways. But I still make stupid mistakes, so. Set vector. Okay, so this is going to be, what is this? Output size. And this will be new vector 2. This will be our width and height. Width, height. And we can make this an int. Oop. Come on. There we go. Okay, so if we normalize that, that should give us our output size. And we can also do one other thing. No, that's fine. Yeah, so let's just visualize the x. So we should see like a nice gradient along the x-axis of the height increasing. Yep. But why does it do that? Why does it do that? Oh, right, because we're exceeding that stupid limit. Let's give that a go. Yeah, cool. Okay. And then let's do it along the y-axis. And we should see the same thing, but going into the distance. Nice. Okay, cool. So we have the UV of our terrain. We can now convert that UV into a particle index. So let's do that. So particle equals UV to particle, particles, UV to particle index. So UV, cool. That gives us our particle. And then let's do, right, so our goal is, just to remind ourselves of the goal, our goal is that water is lower than everything else. Everything else can be flat for now. Just water is going to be below everything else. Unfortunately, we don't know what type of particle this is. We have not passed that data into the shader. So that is going to require a little bit of rework to do. Alternatively, actually, you know what? Let's do it like this. Let's add a height to our particles. So this will be particle.height. Oh, this will be particle.height times the maximum height to normalize it. And then in our falling sand, sorry, in our shaded data, which is spelt wrong. Clean that up, edit, rename. Cool. So here we can have a height, public float height, and we need to populate that. So where do we populate color? Where did we get that? Let's just hard code this for the moment. So whenever we change the particle type, we're just going to hard code the height. So this will be shader data dot height equals this dot get height target type. And we can animate this for free. So this is lerp, the current type. Creating and popping away for lunch, but we'll hopefully catch more of the stream after. Good luck. Thanks, Neil. Enjoy. You said you can't work properly because we're watching, but on the other hand, you say everything out loud and talking to yourself, us, helps a lot. So I have like really bad social anxiety, which is why I traditionally do not like streaming, or I didn't like streaming. I'm having fun with it now, but I really didn't like streaming for the longest time. But I did find last week, like I really struggled like with that basic grid math that we were doing. So every time I would be like, hey, we need to think, I would pretty much just the entire time be like, I need to say something, they're watching me, I need to say something. Like I can't think of the thing I'm trying to think of. So the only way I can really do that is to speak out loud. And hopefully that's more engaging and better to watch anyways. Otherwise, apologies if it's just rambling. But yeah, it's just a self-imposed social anxiety thing. Okay, so get height. This is going to take a particle type, particle type, particle type. And we will return particle type switch Case water. Nope. Sorry, turn switch, water particle type. What the heck? Oh. So if it's water, it's going to be 0. If it's anything else, let's just do 0.1. Just for now. And we'll leave us a nice to-do here for dynamic heights. Okay. What shall I make next on the embroidery? So my favorite, maybe my favorite so far, has been this, well, first of all, the one in the thumbnail that was done by, what is it, Dadfinite, I lost it. What's their name? Dadfinite Dadbo. This one's really cool, because this is like exactly what we're going for. However, these ones are really creative. Like this like cool like physics little, like use of the physics to create this like farm tractor thing. Very, very cool. Some really creative ones. But I think my favorite is this Farewell North recreation with Chesley and like the cliffs here. That's just super cool. Definitely not what we're going for with this tool, but super, super cool. Okay, height. Yep. Okay, I think we need to do a similar thing here where we create a height mapper. Actually, no, I don't want to do this because this is all placeholder. Let's just do this. Height equals, we're going to duplicate it for now. What is it? Particle type, switch, case water. Nope, not case, just water. 0, else 0.1. Okay, so now we should see everything at a level height and then water below everything else. Friends, I think, so if you're not just going for fun, I think the most useful thing, the thing that would help me the most is if you try to create more landscapes like this, because this is like what we're trying to actually go for the gameplay wise. So I'm trying to find like what is easy or difficult or fun or not fun about creating these kind of portrait landscapes or aerial landscapes, I mean. Particle is not set. Oh, that's fine. Okay, so everything should be at a neutral height. Nope, that's an error. Particles is not set. Oh, I know why. We're not setting this globally, are we? This needs to be global. So shader dot set global buffer. Set int. And then what we're going to do is we're only going to run the world builder after the Falling Sands is updated. So let's create an event, action on updated. And we'll do that here. And then rather than running this on update, we will do dot on updated plus equals this dot on simulation updated. And then later on, we can introduce some optimizations to know properly when the simulation is actually updated. Right now, it's still going to be every frame. And let's clean that up. All right. Okay, so now we're seeing it in the terrain. We are not seeing it in the canvas though. And we did see an issue with shader graph not handling globals last time. Let's see if we can fix that real quick. Let's edit this. I don't think you can define a buffer. You can't. So what we'll do, it's kind of annoying. We'll set it globally and specifically on that material, which is silly. Stop material dot set buffer. Okay, let's give that a go. I think I'll draw Chesley and the Zibbity, then an aerial landscape. Cool. Okay. It's fine. So the one thing I'm seeing is that we should probably default all the heights to some value. Otherwise, they're defaulting to the water height. But before we do that, let's just quickly create a really, really simple water plane. 3D object, plane. Let's do that, and then let's just make this blue. And that'll be our water for the moment. We'll come back to that later, of course. Wow, beautiful water. And then if we just move that up a little bit. Cool, we have water. Obviously super janky, but we'll come back to it. And then I'm thinking, so for the bounds of the world, what I'm thinking is that we actually use the embroidery canvas. So we'll have a massive one that's kind of like creating a circle around the world. So let's make this huge. And then this will need to be, I would imagine, half the width, half the height. So if I place sand up here, we should see sand start to appear. Yeah. And it should pool at the bottom. Cool. Yeah, so that kind of works. Super ugly for now, but we'll come back to that when we do the art direction later in the week. So yeah, so you'll be walking around inside that canvas like so. Okay, so I think that's our height map working. The next thing I want to do today is the splat map. So we actually color the terrain to match our embroidery. There's two ways we could do this. So one would be we would generate the splat map. I think the better way to do this, though, potentially, excuse me, might be to just write a custom shader that pulls the color from the embroidery. But it's a bit more complicated because then we need to deal with shadow casting and all that kind of stuff. So for the moment, let's actually just kind of build on what we have here and start by creating a splat map. So splat map is also a texture, and it maps all of our layers to the textures that we define for them. So let's do that. Paint texture. Where do we define the layers again? Edit terrain layers, create layer. So let's have a grass layer, which will just be a boring green for the moment. Again, we'll do art direction later in the week. When there's rock, mud on the left of it, water on the right of it. Oh, when there's rock, mud on the left of it, water on the right of it, the mud still turns to grass. Yeah, so we need to do like a little bit of like path finding to make sure that the water can actually reach the soil that it's turning to grass. So it's on my to-do list, but it's a bit tricky. So we'll have to get to that. So let's do 64 by 64. Okay, grass. Wow, beautiful grass. Embroidery, assets, rendering. Let's do terrain textures. So that's grass. Let's do soil. Again, we'll come back to these later. And we also need rock. Okay, so we're gonna define those 3 layers, and then we're gonna write another compute shader to generate the splat map so that the terrain knows what layer to use at which position, essentially. Make sense? Create layer, rock. Okay, so right now it's just grass everywhere. That's fine. Let's get working on that. So the splat map is very similar. Let's review the documentation. Terrain data splat map. So, they call it alpha maps. So this is a multi-dimensional array where we have the width, the height, and the number of layers. And let's just steal this example so we can visualize it for a moment. So this is all our height map. This.generate height map. Okay, so what are they doing here? So they are creating a multi-dimensional array, which is this.terrain, width and height. And we have 3 layers. But let's just copy this example for a moment just to visualize it. This terrain. So they are visualizing the steepness. So let's give that a go and see what it looks like. It's an error. Array size should be 3. Yeah, of course. This terrain data, alpha map layers. So we're going to move this to a compute shader. I just want to visualize what's going on and kind of make sense of the format, because that's a bit easier to do in C#. Ooh, that's slow. That's very, very slow. That makes sense though. I think the splat map is probably massive. 1024 by 1024. But yeah, we're doing that all in C#. I can see why that would be slow. So it's kind of neat. So we're basically visualizing the height. So the steeper it is, it's using the grass texture, and the flatter it is, it's using the soil texture. Again, this is just an example, just so we can kind of see what's going on here. But it's kind of neat that we're already getting cool little visualization. Okay, so we don't need a texture that big. We can go 256 by 256, I would say. Still very slow. So what if we did... let's just move it to the computer. Okay, so let's copy this. And this will be train splat map. Generate splat map. And this will be a float 4. Size, width, yep. Cool. So what we're going to do is we are going to, just to start, let's render the UV. Hang on. 1 second. Let's make sure we can actually do this. So let's look all this up. Now we need the same for our splat map texture. Generate splat map. An undo button would be helpful in the game. That would actually kind of be hard to code because you'd have to keep track of everything that's happened, including like transitioning to grass and all that kind of stuff, unless you mean just remove the last particle and leave whatever it's modified alone. But if it's just undo particle, that's possible. But then if it's just undo particle, you also have the thread picker, so I don't know how useful that would be. But if you want to do like undo the last input and everything that it's modified since it was input, that's kind of tricky. You guys tell me what you're after. We could definitely add it to the to-do list. I just can't promise that we'll get there. Text, what is this? Splat map. Get alpha map texture. No, that's not what I want. That's going to give us like the actual layer texture. What we want is there no, what do they call it? What do they call it in the editor? Base texture. Height map texture, alpha map textures, that's not what we want. Can we not get terrain access splat map? Assign the splat map from a given terrain to other materials. Alpha map texture. Oh, okay, that makes sense. Because you can have multiple layers of alpha maps. Okay, so we're going to assume that we always have one layer for now. That is not going to work though. Just tagged you on YouTube with my creation. Burns, wild animals, gaming. Cool. Hey, that's awesome. That's very cool. Nice one. That turned out really well. So does the is the little picker guy to remove threads, is that not working for you guys, or what's the kind of pain point you have? By the way, I saw this at an antique shop by my house the other day. It's kind of terrifying. It's a very creepy little embroidered piece. Creepy little clown thing. Okay, so I think this is going to give us what we want. Alpha map textures used by the terrain, used by terrain inspector, undo. Yep, that's fine. Alpha map textures. No more info. Okay, I think that's what we want. But it's weird that's not a render texture. So I'm a bit worried that we're not going to get to overwrite it. So let's just check we can actually do that. So how did it work here? This terrain, this terrain data, copy active render texture to texture. What does this do? Copies the specified part of the active render texture to the terrain texture. What is the terrain texture though? There's so many textures. Texture index. Call the texture. That's fine. What is texture index? I accidentally put dirt over the stone and got rid of it, which made pretty much everything fall out. I'd have to color zip it again. Undo button would have been helpful rather than redoing it. Yeah. I think maybe what we could do, just thinking out loud, is basically create a snapshot of the current state of the entire canvas every time you input. Oh, it's going to use a ton of memory. Every time you place a thread or a particle, we could capture a snapshot of the canvas, and then undo would just go back to that snapshot. And so that would undo everything that was done since that button was pressed. That would work, but we'd have to limit the number of times you can do that because it would use a ton of memory. I'll add it to my to-do list though. I think it's a good idea. I need an undo button. Update for clarity, I'm looking for exposed source and I'm currently using this iteration. Ah, so I think this is what we want. Okay. Copy active render texture to texture. And this takes texture name. Okay, we have that. Index, I guess, would be 0 because we're updating the first splat map. And we can do exactly the same thing here. Okay. I think that's going to work, guys. So we need to do all this as well. Okay, so this is the splat map kernel ID and splat map texture. For those who are joining, so we have a bunch of people join now. So we are basically creating 2 compute shaders that are going to generate the height map and the splat map for a terrain based on kind of user input and generate the terrain from that. So we're creating this game where you can kind of create embroideries that look something like this, which is our kind of reference art. So you can create embroideries that look like this. So they're kind of landscape aerial portraits, essentially. And you'll be able to create that, and it'll generate the terrain from it, so you can actually walk around in a 3D environment. Did you pick up Raft? No, I didn't. I very rarely get to play games now. I feel like making games is kind of my game, so I go through phases with it, but I don't always have like a ton of desire to play anything. I kind of have to like force myself to when I'm kind of doing research and stuff. Yep. Okay. Okay, so we pass our splat map texture in, pass its width and height. And we dispatch. And that is going to, what are we going to do for a moment? Let's just make everything half the first texture, half the second texture, none of the third texture, and we don't have a fourth texture. But just to visualize that this is working, we should see half, what is it, half grass, half soil. And actually, you know what? Let's do the UV. That makes a bit more sense. Okay, let's see if that works. Let's give it a go. And we have an error. Lots of errors today. Variable splat map shader has not been assigned. Same errors before. Should have learned our lesson. Terrain, rim. Oop. Splat map. Another error. Render texture is null. Oh, yeah, we need to do all this. Okay. And is there, do we need to sync? Is that terrain data sync texture? Yep. Terrain data dot. There we go. This is all a lot of guesswork with the terrain API, but fingers crossed, we should see a nice gradient from grass to soil going all the way across to visualize the UVs, and then we can set the real colors. Copy texture called with mismatched data size. 512, 512. 512, 512, so it's the format that's wrong. The format of our texture is wrong. There is a way to convert texture format to, what does this need? Graphics format. I'm sure there's a way to do this. This is it. Graphics format utility. Translates the opposite direction. Get graphics format. Oh, okay, that's easier. Okay, let's give that a go. All right, nope. Mismatched data size. Ah, this is our height map. That's wrong. This needs to be our spot map. The landscape I'm working on is really fun. Awesome. Glad to hear that. Glad folks are having fun with it. Okay, so we're getting something. This is not the gradient I expected, though. We should see, kind of going across the x-axis, we should see... Oh, do we need to normalize this, maybe? No. Okay, let's try this. Let's do uv.x 0, 0, 0. Not what I expected. Let's have a look at this again. So we have grass, soil, rock, and we're only populating the grass with uv.x. So we should see this go from 0 to 1 across the x-axis. It should go from nothing to full grass. Obviously, that's not what we're seeing. And we're only seeing it for a quarter of the terrain. The rest is not updating. Why is that? Oh, we're using this again. Okay, there we go. Let's try that. We're using the resolution of the wrong texture. Okay. Okay, so we're seeing nothing because we have changed this to be nothing. Let's do uv.x. Okay, so is it because we have nothing else there, so it's just jumping to full grass? There we're getting a bit more of a gradient. And then we're starting to see it on the y-axis as well. Okay, I think that's working. Now we need to actually use the proper value for the particle. So let's have a look here. So we don't have the particle type in this struct. So I think we need to finally add that. And back in our simulation, we need to move that from particle to shader data, which is kind of messy, but bear with me for a moment. To clean this all up. Kind of a lot to clean up, actually. Let's do it. Okay, so this is shader.particle data. Actually, you know what? Hang on. That's not what I want to do. What we want to do is just pass in the splat map index. I know we're kind of putting more work on the CPU and less on the GPU, which is not ideal. However, I think in terms of just like getting this to work, this is going to be the easier way. So basically, the CPU is just going to tell the GPU for each particle which splat map it belongs to, and that'll let us do all the blending and all that kind of stuff. So let's put this back in here. In our compute shader, what we're going to do is just return particle dot, not particle type. What do we call it? Splat map something? What do we call that? Splat map strength. Okay. We're going to need a mapper to go from a particle type to splat map. This is kind of messy. Hang on, guys. Let's have a moment to think here. So for each particle, we know what the type is on the CPU. We don't know what the type is on the GPU. All we know is the color and the height. But the color doesn't necessarily correspond to a texture that we can use on the terrain, unless we write our own terrain shader and just generate it that way. And I'm starting to think maybe that was the right way to go. However, it's a bit of a bigger job. So I'm kind of inclined to defer that to tomorrow. No, let's just do it. Okay, let's do it. Okay. Oh, geez. Okay, let's reset this. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Yeah. Okay, so the default terrain shader in Unity is very complicated. But what we can do is just create a very simplified version that is basically going to do, I mean, essentially the exact same shading as the canvas here. It's just going to output the color at the current position based on the particle sampled by the UV. Hopefully that makes sense. So let's get rid of that generate splat map function. We're no longer going to generate the splat map. Let's get rid of that for a moment. And let's create a new shader. And then this doesn't want a shader, it wants material, right? Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's fine. Okay, so basically what we're going to do inside of here is we're going to do just what we were doing in the embroidery shader. Let's do a quick bit of cleanup here. Move this all to HLSL. Don't care about fog for the moment. Let's get rid of all that. Actually, may as well keep it. This needs to include, what is it? Packages, Unity. Core, yeah. Need that. Okay, let's get rid of the fog. Don't need any textures. I think we're kind of committing to a very low poly look here, but that's fine. Okay, this is going to be transform object to hclip. That'll be our entire vertex shader. We don't need that. Don't need that. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We are going to output the current color as basically this. Where are you? Falling sand? Okay, yeah. So let's include falling sand. HLSL falling sand. And so we have the UV. Actually, we could just reuse this function. So return, so colors black. That, let's see what that gives us. So we're just getting plain black here. Let's make sure. this is actually working. So let's return just red. Or let's return i.uv. So what does the UV of a terrain actually come through the way we expect? It does. Okay, so that's fine. So does that mean that we're not getting the particles? UV to particle index, yeah. And return color times particle, yep. Oh, cool. There we go. Okay, so we have a terrain. It's very, very chunky, but we have a terrain that is matching the colors of our embroidery. Neat. It is completely unlit, so we'll need to quickly implement that. And we can start adding some more rules, like adding kind of some more texture and adding gradients based on the steepness and all that kind of stuff. But this gives us a foundation to work with. One thing I thought I should mention is that the gaming computer's fan goes into turbo whilst playing the embroidery game. So it looks like you may be struggling despite being a gaming computer for some reason. But it's running at a steady 60 FPS the entire time? Or is it chugging at all? Hey, Game Dev Basics. It is going very well. We're making some progress here. It doesn't look the prettiest, but we are making progress. And that's what's important. Let's see if we can quickly add in Unity's kind of standard lighting. So let's look at their lit shader for reference. So this does a whole lot of stuff, but we don't care about most of it. Actually, we haven't decided on our art direction. I'm not going to get carried away on this. We're just gonna leave that. So we have that. We'll come back to the art direction later. It's steady 60 FPS. I'll quickly see how much memory and things are being used up while it's running. Yeah, be curious, if you look at your task manager, be curious to see the GPU and the CPU utilization percentage. I'm imagining, because in the version that you have, the GPU is virtually doing nothing, so hopefully the percentage is very, very low. But we haven't looked at optimizing any of this yet, so I'm not surprised that there are some issues. It's normally on performance fan whilst playing lower requirements games. Normally only turbo is used for WQ, raft, and things. And you're saying that it's using the turbo one? Okay, so what do we want to do next? So tomorrow we're going to start spawning 3D objects like trees and grass and all that. But we do have a terrain. We also need a first-person character controller. I don't want to start that now. What can we quickly get? You know what we'll do? Let's smooth out the transition so it's not so blocky. Let's do... that kind of still plays into art direction. It's using turbo. Yeah, let me know in your task manager if it's CPU or GPU that's really heavy. Since this is supposed to be rock and it's supposed to be unmovable, let's quickly extrude that up a bit. Let's do this. So this all needs to work in burst. So we're limited in how this can work. This isn't normally how I would want to do this. But let's do public float, get height. So if it's water, it's 0. If it's rock, it's 0.2. And if it's anything else, it's 0.1. We'll make this a bit more interesting later, but for now. So this is this.heightMapper, get height. Let's do that. And then inside of our simulation job, do this. And all I'm doing right now is just moving the rock so it's a little bit taller. So it actually acts as a barrier in the 3D world, just like it does in the embroidery. Height mapper. And we need to pass that into our job. This is the falling sand transform job. Falling sand transform job. Okay, so we should see rock come up a bit higher than everything else. I just played some and the fan started on performance, then turned on to turbo when I put the dirt down next to water to change it to grass. I'll check task manager now. That kind of makes sense. So the most expensive part performance-wise right now is the way that we detect turning soil to grass. So it makes sense that that would be what kind of like kicks it into high gear. Okay, so then rock should be taller. Neat, okay. And water is still below. Cool. 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 I don't like how everything is water by default, so let's quickly fix that. 50% memory, only 50% CPU. What's the GPU at? Could just be the computer being silly at first. It said 90% CPU, but it slowly went down to 5. I'm not surprised. Well, again, that still makes sense though, because as the water kind of settles, then we would stop turning so much to grass. So that the whole like soil to grass conversion is by far the most expensive thing. And the way it's working right now is kind of very rudimentary, where it's checking like all the neighboring pixels in the simulation to find water. There's probably something we could do to kind of chunk that up to make it a bit more performant. What was it doing? Oh yeah, I don't like how the water, everything is like water to start. So if we don't have a particle, it should be 0.1, but we're never initializing this. So when we initialize these shader data, we need to actually fill this. And let's actually do this. Public static shader data default. Or what am I doing? Hang on. Okay. Let's give that a go. It seems to be about 35% CPU while the grass is spreading, and then it goes down to 4 or 5. Yeah, okay. So, okay, so that makes sense. It makes sense that that whole soil grass thing is by far going to be the slowest thing going on right now. That's fine. Okay, let's just do this. I'm just munching a pretzel while watching. Nice. What kind of pretzel? You like a soft pretzel or like a bag of pretzels? No idea what's going on. Ask questions, guys. I'm really happy to explain. Okay, that didn't work. Everything is still starting very, very low. So why is that? Soft pretzel, nice. Nice. Salted? Mustard? Don't need these. Height is default. 0.1, okay. Initialize all that. You know what? I think there's maybe a better way to go about this. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this in the height map shader. So by default, 0 is our kind of neutral height. So we don't need this. We don't need that. This will be 0. So this will be -1, 1. So then in the shader, what we're going to do is we're going to normalize this from -1 to 1 to 0 to 0.5. So what we'll do, particle.height, normalized height equals particle.height times 2 plus, what is it? No, sorry. Plus 1 divided by 0.5. So that'll go from -1, 1 to 0, 1, and then we multiply that by the height map max. So that gives us a normalized. Certainly not mustard. Oh, how do you eat a pretzel without a spicy mustard? Salted though, salt goes with everything. That's true. Sup, cobbler? How's it going? How's your day been? Okay, that did not work because we're not using it. Zero. So 0 plus 1 is 1 divided by 0.5. No. Times 0.5. Yeah, cool. All right, and then water should move down. And it does. Okay. And then we no longer need this terrain to be so tall. It can be like 10. How do you eat mustard with anything? Mustard is fantastic. Mustard's so good. Yo, what did I miss? Hey, Alex, welcome back. So we have a 3D terrain generating. It looks absolutely terrible, but we do have a 3D terrain generating from our tiny little 2D canvas. So here's our canvas, right? Our little embroidery, and then here's the massive terrain that gets generated from that. So it looks terrible right now. We need to figure out our art direction later in the week. But it is generating, which is the important thing. It's going well. What am I looking at? So what you're looking at here is we are making a game for a game jam. And the idea for the game was inspired by these art pieces by Taylor Brooker. She creates these incredible landscape aerial embroideries. So what we have so far, if we ignore all this for a moment, is we have a falling sand simulation that allows you to create embroideries. And we have particles, and particles can have interactions. So for example, when water touches soil, it turns to grass. We have rock, which stays still. And we have physics for all the particles. So every particle is independently simulated, and then they interact with each other. The idea is to be able to create embroideries like this. So this is one of the ones that was created by the community. It's the same one that's in the thumbnail. Is to create these kind of landscape embroideries. And then what we're doing right now, this big ugly mess, is generating a terrain that matches the embroidery that you created. So then tomorrow we'll probably create the first person character controller so we can actually walk around in this 3D environment. And then later in the week, we'll figure out the art direction so it doesn't look absolutely terrible like it does at the moment. But yeah, so for right now, we're able to kind of translate our little 2D simulation into a 3D terrain with height map and physics and all that good stuff. So it looks terrible, but we're making progress. We're getting a lot of stuff done here. So I'm happy with that. And yeah, does that make sense? That's cool. Thanks. I'm glad you think so. Yeah, we're coming along. So I think the next thing to do is probably the first person character controller, and allow you to basically pull up your embroidery, modify it, close your embroidery, walk around, pull up your embroidery, modify it, and rinse and repeat. So that's probably the next thing. We'll do that tomorrow. I don't think we're going to start that right now. Any news on the elevation? No. So at the moment, water is low, rock is high, everything else is kind of neutral height. Obviously that's not ideal. So there's a couple ways we could go about this. One would be, is this going to be the final visual look? For the embroidery, I think I want to add more contrast and clean things up a bit, but generally speaking, yes, this is the final visual. For this, no. So for the actual 3D world you walk around in, I think probably going to do something, because this is for a game jam, so we only have so much time. Probably go with something kind of like Equilinox, where a very low poly, kind of bubbly environment, because I want to be able to... one thing I didn't mention is like when you have a lot of grass, for example, I want birds and trees and sheep and all these kind of things to start appearing. So basically, based on what you create, it kind of randomly spawns different kind of elements to accent that environment. But in order to do all this for a game jam, we're going to have to be pretty efficient. So I think we're going to do something like this, like a pretty low poly art style. And I say that's going to be efficient. I've never actually done low poly because it's not my favorite thing in the world. So I'm probably going to be terrible at it. So it might not be that efficient in the end, but anyway, it's probably gonna look something like this. What you're seeing now, absolutely not. No. This is a big ugly mess. This looks terrible. So we'll definitely come up with something much more visually satisfying than this. We're just trying to get like the actual generation working, and we're kind of there. Any news on the elevation? So Locks. So we have a couple things to think about there. Ideally, the player has some way to control the elevation. So I think what I think it's Anka in the Discord, what they did is they created a top-down simulation. And the benefit of doing it that way is they're able to control the height. So you can see the color here dictates the height of their simulation. So the darker it is, I think the taller the elevation is at that point. And so they're able to do that. What I kind of miss with this, though, is I'm kind of hanging on for dear life with this like falling sand simulation. I really like it. It feels very satisfying, but it's completely at odds, I understand, with creating like a landscape, or sorry, a bird's eye view environment. It's just like completely at odds with that. So I'm kind of like putting it on the back burner, but we might have to do something similar to what Anka did, which is more of a top-down embroidery and kind of forsake the... He's still doing a top-down, a falling sand simulation. You just don't get that like satisfying gravity with it. So that's one thing. The other thing we could do is randomly generate it, that's also very not satisfying. So we could just use like, we could just generate noise and generate, you know, hills and all that with noise, but that sucks because then the player can't actually control it. So I don't like that either. The final thing, oh, I was suggesting that you could go over it a second layer like you do with real embroidery. Interesting. So how would that work? So maybe you have like another tool, because so we have a needle, we have I can't remember what we call this, picker thing. What if maybe there's another tool, Ilox, to do what you're saying, where you can kind of like grab and pull up areas or something? I'm not sure. You'll have to figure that out. What if you just remove those little water bits on top that go infinitely back and forth, like make them settle down? Oh, these guys. Yeah, good question. I don't know if that's I think that's actually kind of complicated, because they need to be there. So like if I start erasing this, they need to start falling down. Yeah, maybe we could detect like if they've gone back and forth and nothing's changed and you haven't modified, like, I don't know, there's a lot of variables. We'd have to detect if it's possible that they need to start falling or something. But I agree, it's very like jarring. And then especially when you're walking around in like 3D world, it's gonna be very weird if there's like water just like flying back and forth like we have right now. So we'll have to solve that somehow. I was suggesting that you could go over it. Oh yeah, sorry, I already read that. What about random highs and lows? That's an option. Yeah, random. I think random's like kind of the easiest way to go, but I don't know that it's very satisfying because then you have no control over it. Is your dog on the keyboard? She was. She just ran away. I don't know where she's gone. But yeah, this is kind of bad. We also need to figure out like, so right now obviously I can see both. The actual gameplay is going to be, let's restart this. The actual gameplay is going to be, you're in this flat, boring gray box world. You pull up your embroidery and you start creating things. And then when you put your embroidery down, the world has changed, right? So you're kind of seeing both at the same time, but I think when you're walking around the world, so when you put your embroidery down, we need to figure out, does the simulation stop or does the simulation keep going? So if I put the embroidery down now, does it pause? Or does it keep going? Because if it keeps going, then the world's like you're standing here and like things are like flying around, and like what if something hits you? Like I don't know, we'll have to figure that out. With random, the player is not going to be happy if you envision a certain terrain but it's completely off. Yeah, I think that's the issue. Terrain changes over time, like breakable part of the mountain. I'm not sure I follow, Cobbler. You have to wait for the final particles to be done moving. Yeah. Maybe. We have to think about like, it's like it'd take a while, right? There's a lot of stuff. Like, this is why I'm doing this for a game jam, because like there's so much about this that I don't even know if this is going to work, if it's going to be fun, if it's going to be usable, if any of it's going to make sense. So, yeah, it's kind of weird. It's a weird idea. I'm admittedly not a good game designer, so I really appreciate all the suggestions, because yeah, as you guys know, I'm more of a narrative person than a game designer. Could you do something like random height generation in the 3D world, but in a way where the larger a certain area is, the more elevation it has in the center, that it gets lower close to the sides? So if you had, that's an interesting idea. So if you had like a little bit of soil, it's quite low elevation, and the more you pack into an area, the higher the elevation it becomes. Yeah, I think we could do. I think we couldn't do it just based off distance, because if I had like one water particle here, then suddenly it would all come flying down. Then you can't make a plane. Cobbler, I'm not sure what decaying mountains is. Is that like an algorithm or something? Decaying mountains. I'm guessing it's not this. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Then you can't make a plane. Yeah, that's a problem for sure. If you want a giant field, you can't. So I'm not imagining that we're going to have like massive mountains or anything. I think it's going to all be quite like gently rolling hills. So if we look at like the English countryside, it's the first thing that comes to mind. Just have like these kind of, that has mountains, but these kind of like gently rolling hills. So I don't think we're gonna have like a ton of elevation either way. It would just be kind of like gentle, kind of sloping, like a glen kind of deal. And then, yeah, because basically nothing can go higher than the rim of the world or whatever we use to kind of block off the world. The other thing we need to figure out is I really, really want... This is what we were talking about at Discord over the weekend. I really want these kind of segregated fields or segmented fields where like each field can kind of have a different color. So we could do it like... we talked about a bunch of different ways to do it. One thing I think would be probably the most effective is a Voronoi diagram, which looks like this. So this is a noise algorithm that kind of generates these like nice areas. But then does the player control that? Do they just discover it? Like does grass automatically take on the color from like an invisible noise texture that the player doesn't know about? And then they can kind of like add hedges around it, or like how does that work? There's a lot of questions like I really don't know the answer to. Exactly, like as if you pour the dirt from the top and it pours to the sides, like the physics in the embroidery but in 3D. Yeah, you're talking about for like when you have a whole bunch of the same component in a similar area, it kind of rises up. Yeah, I think that'd be cool. But in the end, we might actually have to go with something like what Anka did, because I think this is going to give you like the most control, and it's the easiest to reason about, because we still have that issue where like this doesn't feel like you're creating an aerial landscape shot. It feels like you're creating, I still don't know what to call that, but like a horizontal shot. After shooting high mountains, some of them can be falling apart over time as you play, changing shape dynamically. Yeah, I think I'm just like not envisioning mountains. That's the only thing. I'm very much thinking like gentle, like farmland essentially. Because if we get, so one other thing we didn't talk about, and this is like my favorite thing, is, who was it? Was it Barry? Barry, yeah, had this idea for the names, reap what you sow. So, but sow is in like embroidering, not as in planting. And this gave me a lot of ideas about like what the gameplay for this could actually be, and definitely like in a farming environment. So you would create your farm, and then you would go into it and you would like pick your crops and whatever, and like each level could have an objective where it's like gather 10 wheat, so you have to figure out how to like grow wheat, or I don't know, shear 10 sheep, and you have to figure out how to get sheep, stuff like that. So I'm very much thinking of like a farming thing, and that theme definitely lends itself to more like gently sloping hills and whatnot, as opposed to like a big mountainous terrain. Can you recommend any good animal, specifically dog games for you to play on my channel? I don't know. There's a cool game called Farewell North. It's currently on sale. 40% off. Ignore the fact that I developed it. It's a cool game. What else? Lost Ember is cool. Stray is all right. I'm not a huge Stray fan. Nice. I don't know, what are some other animal games? Equilinox is really cool. Actually, we've been talking about that game a few times on this. It's a very cool game. I definitely recommend it, and it's super cheap. You basically create these like biomes. It's been a long time since I played this, but if I remember correctly, you create these biomes, and then like you have like objectives to get like your animals healthy, and they have like different not perks, but what am I trying to say? They have different like requirements from the environment that they're in, so you have to kind of like tailor the environment to like suit that animal. And yeah, it's a really cool game. I definitely recommend checking that out. Didn't you have a story in mind? Yes. So the story I had in mind was all about like, so the original idea was that you would embroider kind of key moments from this person's life. So the player character would be someone who's like a bit older, and they, you know, you'd be embroidering key moments of their life, like when they got married, when they graduated from school, when they got their first house, when they lost a loved one, all these kind of stuff. So each level would have like a theme related to that, and you would try to like figure out what the theme is through the items that are populating in the world. But ever since Barry suggested this name, Reap What You Sow, I'm completely thinking of the farming thing. I just think it's really cool. All right, guys. I think this looks terrible, but we got a lot of progress today. I think there's a couple issues, like the world boundaries don't exactly align with this. Let's fix that real quick. Cool, that's better. Yeah, there's a few issues. Obviously, it looks terrible. But we do have a world generating, and that's the important part. We can definitely make it prettier later on. We have the world generating, so I think tomorrow the goal will be to actually walk around the world. And the day after that, we'll start spawning things, spawning trees and all that kind of stuff. Nice thread spool thingies. 8mint, thank you so much for making those. I know you said you didn't want credit, but I did shout you out at the beginning of the stream, and yeah, so 8mint, everyone, is the person who made the new thread spools. Definitely a huge upgrade. They look great. Thank you very much for doing that. Make them a little bigger and boost the brightness of the texture a bit. Yes, this whole thing is very, very dark. We need to revisit all of this. We can quickly make them a little bit bigger, though. Let's do that real quick. So you can't make a beach if sand plus water is grass. This is something that came up over the weekend as well. So right now we have soil. We do not have sand. So we do need to make a separate soil particle, or sorry, sand particle. And the difference between sand and soil is just that sand does not turn to grass. So the thread is limited. At the moment, no. We need to figure that out. There's a lot of gameplay stuff that we need to figure out. One thing I was thinking was that... Make that a bit bigger. One thing I was thinking was that we have the threads come in kind of like a deck of cards, so you don't know what's going to be next. So you say you get a soil one, you use it, and then the next one reveals itself, and then you use that. So you have to like figure out where you're going to place things, right? And there's a little bit of RNG there where you're like hoping, I really hope I get some water. I need water for this field. That kind of plays into the farming, I think, as well. So that's one thing to think about. Right now, we don't really have any gameplay. We're just kind of like setting up the basics to see if this thing even works. But yeah, I think having limited thread and kind of randomizing the order of the threads as you get them, as opposed to just being able to pick whenever you want, I think that could be cool. And then maybe we just keep like a free design mode where you have unlimited thread and you can do whatever you want. It would look less dark if the table was lighter, maybe. It would, but I think actually it's our post-processing. Let's have a look at that. No, it is not our post-processing. What is it? I don't know. This is all going to change, though, because I think we're actually doing away with the table. Because I think when you're walking around the world, you're just going to like pull up your embroidery, edit it, and then put it back down. But you're always going to be like seeing the 3D world around you. So I'm not too worried about this for the moment, because I think that's going away. Stitch in Time. Ooh, that's a good name. I like that. That's a good name. Especially if we're going for the memory. Oh yeah, you just said that. Thanks, Pamela. Yeah, for the memory idea, Stitch in Time. I'm gonna jot that down. It's cool. Okay, so we have Reap What You Sow. Someone else in the comments suggested Loomscape, which I think is really cool. Like one of these, Loomscape. I think that's pretty cool. And then we have Pamela Stitch in Time. I like that as well. What's that sounds familiar. Is that from something? It's like a Disney thing. Maybe it just sounds like something else. But I like it. That's a good one. Do different size needles have some functionality, or are they just for decoration? So they actually change the spawn rate. So if you use the big needle, it spawns a lot. If you use the tiny needle, it spawns like 1 pixel at a time. So you can make very, very kind of specific shapes. And then obviously the ones in the middle are kind of just in the middle. And then this guy removes. So it's like your eraser. Yeah, that's cool. Maybe even tiered thread pool as you have smaller pair to work with. Yeah. Loom Life. It's cool. It's a Kim Possible movie. Is that true? Doesn't look like it. It's funny though. Cool. Cool, guys. Okay, I think we'll leave it there for today. Tomorrow we'll get walking around working so you can actually look around our really ugly environment. And then the rest of the week we'll kind of figure out what our art direction is and start spawning, you know, trees and animals and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so we need to figure out what the gameplay is. So I'm really leaning towards the farm version. I think it'd be really cool if each level is like kind of looking back on a year. So it'd be like, I don't know why the 1980s come to mind. So like the bottom of your thing would be like 1980. And it's like, you know, it was a good year. It's nice and sunny. It's very basic. So you go through, you create your farm and everything. And then you have an objective to like get 10 sheep. So if you have a lot of grass, that creates sheep somehow. That's what we kind of have to figure out. And then, yeah, so you go collect your 10 sheep. You solve the game, you move to the next level. The next level, maybe it was a rainy year. So basically like you have to deal with like rain kind of constantly falling from the top. So you have to like deal with that somehow. So you have to add like lots of barriers or something to prevent your fields from flooding, or I don't know. And then the next year, maybe there's like a fire. So you have to put the fire out, or I don't know. We'll have to figure that out. But that's kind of where my head's at the moment. Yeah, as I said, game design is definitely not my strength. That's not where my head's at. So I definitely could use some suggestions there. Bye, have a lovely day. Remember to walk the dog. Of course, we'll do. We have our walk coming up in like an hour or so. Fantastic work, Kyle. Really enjoyed the stream. Thanks so much, Neil. Thanks for tuning in. Always appreciate it. Stitch in time saves 9. Old proverb thing. Ah, cool. Did not know that. What do you have to saw things you want? Like draw a sheep to spawn it? That could be cool. That could be cool. So you have to like... and then like a sheep appears. That could be funny. One other thing I was thinking... I'm just rambling at this point. One other thing I was thinking would be cool if we had like little patches. So in addition to your thread, you would have like a... I don't know, like a farmhouse patch. Like something like this. Okay. So you have a few of these for each level and you have to like place them somewhere. So wherever you place your farmhouse, that's like maybe where you start from when you actually walk around the 3D world. And then maybe you have like a tractor and you can place your tractor somewhere. I don't know. Or you like your sheep or something, you can place them somewhere and you have to place them in a field that like you can get enough water to, or you know what I mean? Stuff like that. So yeah, we need to figure out all this kind of like gameplay stuff. Lovely sheep shocking. Thank you. Loom-broidery. That's cool. Jot that down. Loom-broidery. Good idea. And sheeps. Yeah. So you'd have like little patches for sheep, and then you can spawn your flock of sheep somewhere. We have to figure out like what's the challenge. Is it a challenging game? Is it a puzzle? Is it just like a chill, you know, just make your world and kind of walk around it and explore? We gotta figure out some of that game design stuff, and it's definitely not my strength. But yeah, I think we're off to a cool start. We have something here. I don't know exactly what it is, but we have something here. And then, yeah, we have for those who missed the stream, we have our terribly ugly 3D environment walking around, spawning, but I promise you this is actually something that we'll be able to make use of and kind of walk around this world. It looks terrible, but it's definitely useful. All right, guys, I'm rambling at this point, so I'm going to call it there. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for watching the streams. I really appreciate it. Actually, you know what we need to do real quick before we go is we need to do our charity donation. So I haven't done one since the first stream. Let's do that real quick. So the damage is we're at 32 errors. We've donated 12 so far. So we need to do, what is that, 40 pounds? And I'm just doing this on the side so you don't see my credit card. Other 40. Two-factor. Okay. Cool. There's the proof. And there's the link if you guys want to check it out. Absolutely don't have to, but it'd be amazing if we could raise a bit of money for the charity for this stream. But no pressure whatsoever. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll be back tomorrow to do the first-person character controller. We can actually start walking around and start spawning some stuff. All right, guys. Adios.